Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by former Playboy centerfold and cover girl, but now she's transitioned to a top-rated insurance professional. Deborah doesn't take no for an answer. She has taken a lot of risks, and her success has not come easy. Deborah Driggs. Deborah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you, Curtis. I really appreciate the time that you allow me today on your show. Thank you. And I'll just clarify for you that SAG is the Screen Actors Guild. You got it right. And I am still a member, and I actually just finished working on a film. So I'm still working in that industry that I started in 1983, if you can believe that.
Well, I just actually interviewed somebody yesterday that's a member as well, and was just sitting here looking over your bio, and it slipped my mind of what it was. So we're going to be talking about your film as well. But first, why don't you give everybody a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I'm born and raised in California. I'm a Southern California girl. Grew up in the South Bay area, which is Torrance, Manhattan Beach, and Hawthorne. Grew up in that area. Made my way up to Hollywood, North Hollywood, in 1983. And grew up in Southern California figure skating. So my dream as a kid was to compete in the Olympics. And that was the goal, was to do the competitions and all of that. And so when my parents got divorced, that dream came to an end. But the tools that I learned from having a coach, everything that I knew up until that point was getting up, skating, working with coaches, having kind of goals. And I had that intention. I was just working towards that intention. And when I started to really get some momentum, it stopped. And so the good news is today, when you look back on things like that in your life that were at the time just really difficult, is that there were so many gifts in all of it. And I was way ahead of the game as far as, I had these tools and these coaches and these mentors that had really taught me what it meant to be in that world, so to speak, and work with coaches and mentors. And so it's no surprise that a lot of other things that I did in my life had that kind of tenacity because I had learned that from those skills. So when I started to go into the entertainment business, I took that with me, that mindset with me. And the same thing applied in anything that I did moving forward. You get somewhere, you're on time. There's no way I would step on the ice late. My coach would have, that would not go over. You learn those little things right off the bat when you have coaches. And so I just knew, I was always that actor that was on the set. I was there at my call time. There were no excuses. And I just had that mentality. And it really helped me because I saw how other people my age were kind of suffering because they didn't have that responsibility, that mindset. They didn't have those skills. And so that kind of really carried me through. And so I decided I was going to be an actress. And before that, I had done a year as a professional cheerleader. And that is when it hit me that I really want to perform and I really want to get into the acting world because we had been doing morning shows and talk shows. photo shoots and all this great stuff. And we got so much attention as a group, as a cheerleading squad, that I decided that I really wanted to continue. And I remember when I told my family, I'm gonna be an actress and a model. And they were just like, yeah, but everybody wants to do that, and only 1 in a million, and only this. And you know how hard it is. And the other thing that I've learned, and I'm into my 50s now. So the other thing that I've learned is that you never take advice from anybody that cannot see it for themselves, or that has not even come close to doing what it is you want to do. How do they know? How do they know? And that's always a question now when I'm starting a business or I'm starting a new project and somebody tries to stop me in my tracks, that's not going to work out. And my first question is always, how do you know? Because if they can give me some really cool answers that I believe, or that I think that's a good perspective, I'll listen. I'm all ears. But most of the time, they don't have an answer for that question. How do you know it's not going to work out? How do you know that only 1 in a million? Show me the statistics, So I kind of learned that at a very young age, that people who cannot see it for themselves are not going to see it for you. They're not going to support you. They're not going to cheer you on because it's too uncomfortable. They don't understand what it is you're doing. And so I was kind of out on my own, really, at a very young age. I was going out there doing some really hard stuff and didn't really have the support of anybody going, you can do it. You got this, And I actually had the opposite. I had people saying, well, I don't know. I don't know how long that's going to last. Maybe you just lucked out on that one, but you might want to consider something that's more stable. And, so I was getting a lot of pushback. And, the more I booked commercials, the more I booked print jobs, the more I booked gigs, so to speak, the more I booked music videos, the more I progressed in that business, there was nothing stopping me. It was just like a snowball effect. I just kept going because I knew that if I can book one thing, I can book other things. And it just proved to be true. The more I put that energy into what I was doing, the more things started happening. And so Playboy came around at a time where I had already kind of established myself with agents, and I had already done a handful of commercials. I had already started doing print work. And so I got a call that they wanted to see me about a project that they were starting, and they wanted me for the cover. And, my first question was, well, is there nudity involved? Because, the first thing I thought about in 1989 when somebody mentioned Playboy was nudity. And my agent said, I don't think so. This is for a cover. I don't think they're going to do any nudity. And so I went on the audition. It was kind of a funny audition because I went to the famous building on Sunset, and they hand me a robe and tell me to take off all my clothes, and that they'll call me back and we'll do a couple Polaroids, and that'll be that. And I thought, take off my clothes and put on a robe. I said, that's not the audition that I'm here for. I'm here for the book, the cover of the book. And they said, well, everything we do involves some type of nudity. So we just need to see your body. And just to give the audience a little perspective, because today this wouldn't matter at all. But back then they were looking for scars and tattoos and piercings, birthmarks, anything. I mean, they really were, because it was a different time and they were looking for a different canvas back then. Now, today, those things don't matter so much, but back then it did. And so I went and put the robe on, but I didn't take off all my clothes. I left on my undergarments. And I went into the studio to do the Polaroid, and they just kind of laughed at me. They just said, well, we need to see your body. And I said, well, this is it. This is all you're going to see, because I'm not here for that. And so I left, and I didn't think it went so well. But somebody in the studio saw my Polaroids, and I got a call that they wanted to shoot me for a centerfold, which was so ironic because, I was kind of put off by the whole audition. So my agent said, they are so interested in having you come in and shoot to be a centerfold. And I said, I just don't know. Like, how will that, will it affect my career? I mean, what will that, let me tell you what, I was so, even though I'm from LA and I have more experience than most girls that come in from around the world to shoot for Playboy, I still just had no idea how it would affect me, or I had never thought about it. So after talking about it with a lot of people that I respected in the business at that time, we decided that Playboy was the #1 magazine in the world and that it could do nothing but help or, propel my career, perpetuate, what I was doing. And so I went for it, and I became March 1990 centerfold, and I was on the cover of April 1990 for the magazine.
Well, let's talk about what was it like once you finally decided to do the audition. How were you treated as a Playboy centerfold? And explain to people what Playboy centerfold is for those who might not know.
So Playboy's was back in 1989, like I said, was the #1 magazine in the world. If you wanted to read the magazine or see the magazine, you had to buy it. There was nothing online. There was no internet back then. So that's what made it really the #1. I think I can't even remember what the numbers are, but it was, millions of subscribers. And the centerfold was the girl in the middle of the magazine that literally folded out into a centerfold. And it's one of the most beautiful, well-done magazines ever. It's a total gentleman's magazine. Everything from cars, cigars, amazing articles. The magazine was just way ahead of its time. So I was the pinup girl centerfold. I don't know. I was trying to think of some other words for it, but yeah, pinup girl centerfold in the magazine. And, just part of that history, which was amazing. And I was treated how I was treated. Amazing. Everybody was just treated first class, really, really beautiful people on the set. They had this thing down. They knew what they were doing. It was very professional. And it's the reason why the girls look so amazing, because they knew what they were doing. They had the three main photographers, Richard Fegley, who was my photographer, Arnie Freitag, and Stephen Wada. And, just 3 class acts. I had the opportunity to work with all 3 of them. And it was an amazing experience. I have all good things to say. I really didn't have any, there was nothing that I could complain about at all. It was just beautiful.
Well, how did this opportunity open the doors for other opportunities?
Well, once my issue came out and I was the it girl for those 5 minutes, I call it my 5 minutes of fame, because it was just, everybody wanted to meet. So, everybody was getting calls saying, can we meet Deborah? Can she come in for a meeting? Whether they had an audition or not, they just wanted to meet in case something did come up and I would be right for it. So I just started going on a lot of meetings, a lot more auditions. I got flown to Chicago to be on the Oprah Winfrey Show. I got flown to Acapulco to work alongside Bob Hope. I mean, it was like I was on a whirlwind. Just kind of like went on tour, I guess.
Well, let's talk about, so you transition. What made you transition from Playboy to reinventing yourself and building another career? And tell us about that career.
So after Playboy, I worked for a few more years in the entertainment business. And after I got married and had kids, we decided we were going to move to Park City, Utah, and raise our 3 kids in a more wholesome environment and get out of LA. And so in 2004, my marriage came to an end, and I found myself at the age of 40, divorced, broke, 3 kids, and having to figure out how I was going to bring in a check. And my only skills at that time were that I was aware of, that the skills that I knew were going on auditions and working on sets and so forth. And so I had an agent in Salt Lake City. Everywhere I go, I always have an agent, and I'll go on auditions wherever I'm living, but it wasn't enough to sustain my kids and I. And I didn't divorce with this huge alimony, settlement. So I had to start over. And so I worked a lot of odd jobs, and got into real estate and started building some confidence after passing my real estate exam and doing well in that business for a while. But in 2008, when the market crashed, my business was the first to go because it was a second home luxury multi-million-dollar market. And so I found myself back at the drawing board, and I took a job in New York, which meant that my kids had to live with their dad. And so there were a lot of changes, a lot of chaos. And I ended up taking this job in New York that really, really taught me some business skills, things that I just, I had to learn the hard way, really, because, I was faking it. I was pretending like I knew what I was doing, but, I was learning as I went along. But the thing that I found that was my number one skill was putting people together and really networking and knowing, oh, you should meet so-and-so. And then I was really good at setting up meetings and setting up introductions and putting people together. And through that, I reconnected with the group that did my life insurance when I was married. And I had been referring them business. They're located in Beverly Hills. And I met one of the partners when he was in New York. And I said, I refer you a lot of business. Can I start getting a referral fee? And I'll refer you more business. Now that I'm in New York, I'm meeting all sorts of people. And they had an office in New York. And he just looked at me and he said, go get your license. Do both. So I did. On the weekends, I studied and I got my life insurance license, and I took a whole test on life settlements. And I would say probably around July 2011, I stopped the print procurement business in New York and started life insurance full time. And by 2012, I had grown my business into $1 million business. So it was like, it looks like it happened overnight. It really, everything that went into it was a lot of years.
Well, let's talk about a lot of things that you went through during the tough times, such as trauma, recovery, and things like that. Talk about all that stuff that you had to go through and how you made it through.
Yeah, I would say that for me, interestingly enough, a lot of the trauma and the chaos and all that really hit me in my 40s. And I think I had just been pushing. I was kind of underlining there before, and I knew something was up, but I just didn't know what it was. I just thought maybe I was a little more agitated than usual, or I was a little more sad than usual. I would always have some reason or excuse for how I was feeling. But when I was 40 and going through my divorce and having big life changes, it really hit me like a ton of bricks. And I thought, oh my God, everything that I had been trying to push down for so many years. And I think it just goes right back to childhood abandonment, issues with divorce, and, my parents not really providing me with the adequate attention at a young age. It just kind of went back to that. And I thought, oh my God, there are so many things here to look at. And so I started on a journey because it was really painful. And, my divorce kind of brought me to my knees, not because of anything outside of myself, but because it was kind of the mirror of what I had been pushing down for so many years. And so, and I didn't really have time to be on my knees, I kind of had to pick myself up and keep going and just keep pushing forward because there's nobody else going to do it. And so that became more of a really beautiful mindset for me, because I thought, okay, there are choices every day, and I can either look at this as something that's really horrible, or I can choose to change the story and rewrite it and start over. And for so long, I was living in a narrative that just wasn't useful to me anymore. And I just stayed in it way too long and really had no tools of how to get out of it. And then once I started having some success in the business, this last business that I'm in, when I started having success in 2012, 13, 14, it's when I started going slowly, not quickly, but slowly on a journey of like, okay, well, now you have the time, you have the financial security, you can go on a journey and you can start working on these things that have been sitting there and haven't really been looked at. So, how can I look at that stuff? And I remember there were a few coaches I met with in the beginning, and, I went through a lot of coaches in the beginning because I didn't really relate with a lot of them. And I thought, well, I'm kind of already, people think that when you're successful, that they just need to kind of guide you to keep getting successful. And I was looking for more of doing some deep dive trauma work. And so it took me a while before I started finding the right group of people. But through that exploration, I really figured out that in life, I'd never really set up my team of support. And what I mean by that is I had never set up a team of, these are the mentors, these are the coaches, these are the cheerleaders, these are the family members, and kind of every group has a purpose that they serve in your life. And if you're going through without any cheerleaders, it's really hard. If you don't have somebody in your life going, good for you, oh my God, that's so great, keep up the good work, that would be a cheerleader. And if you don't have somebody you can go to when the financial stuff is falling apart, that would be a mentor, a mentor that understands your business, and that, yeah, sometimes things are going to fall apart. Then you go to that person, or somebody that's going to help you stay in line with everything that you're doing. Meaning, a coach is an overall coach. Like, did you work out today? Did you pray? Did you do your meditation? Did you make your 5 business calls? Did you know what I mean? Like, that's the coach role. And so I kind of figured out, probably I would say about 5 years ago, that I really needed that team of support, the full team, not just a coach, not just a mentor, not just one cheerleader, but a real team of people in the support group. Like, who do you call really when you feel like everything's falling apart and you don't know what to do? And I was like, wow, who do you call? And for a very long time in my life, I didn't have any of those team members. I didn't have that coach. I didn't have the mentor. I didn't have the cheerleader. I didn't have the person that you call when things are falling apart, and you need that. I highly recommend that for everybody on whatever journey you're on, to have a support, to have a team of certain people with certain roles. Like, I'm not going to go to my cheerleader for financial advice, and I'm not going to go to my mentor for a rah-rah session, so everybody holds a specific role.
Well, let's talk about, despite all the hardships that you have faced throughout your life, let's talk about how life has became full circle now.
Well, yeah, I would say that, I did not grow up with a lot of money. So I had a lot of fear around financial security because there was none when I was growing up. And I just remember that a lot of the arguing, a lot of the fighting, a lot of the disagreements, a lot of the the subject matter was always revolved around money. And so I'm going to have a lot of financial insecurity growing up. And I did. And I also didn't grow up I didn't have examples of real entrepreneurship. I didn't have examples of real loving marriages. I really couldn't tell you. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking right now of one married couple that I knew as a kid that I thought, wow, they look really happy. I didn't have, my grandparents didn't seem real happy. They seemed to what do you call it? Like nip at each other all the time. And, my parents obviously were horrible to each other. And then my aunts and uncles, nobody, it just seemed like their divorce was very prevalent. And so I didn't have any examples of any of these things. And when you don't grow up with any example or environment that shows you how to do certain things, you have to figure it out, usually the hard way. Now, thank God, there's so many resources out there. You don't even have an excuse. There's no excuse to not be in shape. I mean, you could have the best coaches in the world now for $19.99 a month. You can have them on Zoom teaching you how to work out. So there's no excuse anymore for any of these things. Everything is available today, but back then nothing was. You were kind of out on an island by yourself. And I would say how everything has come full circle is, I started out in a business in 1983 that I worked really hard to become a part of. And I would say the big difference today is that I've come full circle. I'm back in a business that I love. I just completed a film. I am back with one of my original agents that I signed with back in 1986. I have much more appreciation today for this business that I kind of started taking for granted of when I was in my 20s. I have such a huge appreciation now. Just to be on a set and working is a gift. So I don't take any of it for granted today. I think today I have a lot more gratitude in my heart. And I realize that there's just really nothing to be too deeply upset about, because it's a fleeting moment, this life that we're living. I've lost a lot of friends these last couple of years. And I just know I'm really aware of time and what that means. And it's how are we spending our day? What are we doing? Are we contributing? Are we giving back? Are we doing something good? I host a podcast every Sunday night, a live show. And one of the guests we had on, famous musician, and he was saying that the whole point now, especially after this pandemic that we all live through, is to give back. And I agree 100%. It's all about giving back.
Well, lay it all out for us. Let's talk about the projects that you're working on, your upcoming projects, your film, your business, your podcast, anything you want to put out there where the audience can check you out, buy some life insurance or whatever they want to do.
Yeah. So I have a website, which is my name. It's www.deborah.driggs.com. And at my website, I write a weekly blog. So basically, I've turned my journal into a weekly blog. And what I mean by that is anything that I'm thinking about, I'm suffering from, I'm obsessing over, I'm resentful of, I write about it. And then I put it into a blog. And once a week, I post a blog. I've written over 50 blogs, which is amazing to me because a year ago, I would have told you I'm not a writer. And it turns out that I actually really love writing. So that's one of the beautiful things that I do. Next year, I have 3 books that I'm coming out with, 3 projects that I'm working on, I should say. And then I just worked on a film called Neon Bleed. And, that is just an amazing project to work on. And I host a podcast every Sunday night live at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time called Roger the Wild Child Show. And it is me and two amazing radio disc jockeys. And we have all walks of life on the show, but mainly our main guests have been really amazing, famous musicians. And it's just turned into a really fun. I mean, I think we started out with 2 viewers or 2 people watched the show, and now we're up to 1,000 views, while we're doing the show live. So it's really turned into a fun gig. And I really love working with these 2 guys, Jimmy Knight and Roger Gardner. And it's just amazing how life comes full circle, because I would never have imagined a year ago that I'd be hosting a show every Sunday and writing a blog once a week and back with a print agent and a theatrical agent and auditioning and being back in a business that I love so much. So those are all the projects that I'm working on. You can follow me on social media. You can follow me on my website. And when you sign up at my website, if you go to my website and you sign up for my personal newsletter, you will immediately receive my 15 tips, things that I do every day. That, I may not do all of those 15 things, but I guarantee you I do at least 5 to 6, 7 things on that list every day. And that list saves my life. And I can tell you this, everything on that list, I can almost say, I was just thinking if there's 1 or 2 things, but I think everything on the list is free. They're all free tips, of what to do when you're kind of spinning out or you're sitting in uncomfortable feelings. These are things that I do, and it's real simple. I keep it so simple today. I just cannot allow any type of chaos or unpleasant situation, I should say, enter into my energy anymore. It's just not worth it. Life is way too short. So these are my 15 go-tos. Yesterday, I was having a really tough time around 2:30, 3 o'clock. I was getting a little burned out and just kind of focusing on the wrong thing. And I thought, okay, what's on my list? Because sometimes I forget. I have a list. And one of the things on my list is just go sit in silence. And I have a beautiful spot where I live where I can go sit and just listen to birds, look at the trees. And I just sat in silence. And it's kind of like I dozed off. It wasn't a nap, but you know how sometimes you can go into that deep, tranquil breathing, and it feels like it's like the best sleep, but it's not really sleep. It's just you're just in silence. So those are the kind of things that are on my list, and it doesn't cost any money to do that. And I felt so much better. It was better than getting a facial or a massage,
Your social media is Deborah Driggs, right?
Yes, at Deborah Driggs.
All right. So guys, make sure you follow her. Do you have any other final thoughts before we close out?
No, I think we covered it all. And I want to thank you again. Thank you for having this platform for people to come and share their story. And I'm wishing everybody a blessed day. And
before we go, your live podcast, how do people check that out?
Oh, yes. So I would say we have a website, rogerthewildchild.com, or on Facebook. If you follow me on Facebook, you will see my show is posted everywhere on my page.
Absolutely. Well, Deborah, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join and share your story and teach, motivate, and inspire.
Thank you.
And listeners, please be sure to follow, rate, review after listening. And for all you Android listeners, go to the Google Play Store and download the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast app. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.